All right, so again, I know that over the summer our schedules can be a little bit different. We've been in the middle of a series. It will wrap up next week about what is church and what is a great church, as we are preparing to move from a building like this to more of a house style type of church. We wanted to make sure that we understood, is it a building? Is it the people inside it? Is it the mission? Like, what is the purpose of church and why? And so we're going through the Bible to see what Jesus and what Paul and what God told them to write about, what church needs to be about. So the past few weeks we've been in that series. If you ever miss one of these because you're in a beautiful vacation location, feel free to jump on our website, springsranchchurch.com, and you can download the audio files and listen to them on your iPods wherever you are at any time that you want to. You can also watch these videos at any time on YouTube. And I don't have any idea how to use YouTube. So basically what I do is I link you to the YouTube message off of our Facebook account. So if you've got Facebook, you've got a way to get to the video. If you don't have Facebook, I don't have any idea what to tell you to do. All right, I'm sorry. That's all I know. I've exhausted my understanding of all things technical at that point, but I'm sure somebody in the room can help you. Okay, and that's not a big deal at all for some of you that you can direct other people to that spot. So I'd love for you to keep track of what's going on, because again, we desperately want to know what it's going to take for us to be a great church. Would you agree? I mean, who likes to be mediocre at anything? Anyone? No, we want to be great at something. And especially when it comes to the church, because it's God's mission. So over the past few weeks, as we've looked through the Bible, we can kind of pull things out of there and see what it is about. And today's no different. We're going to look at the third thing that it takes to be a great church. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of a story. My mom just got off of a trip that she had planned. You know, Dad passed away about 1.5 years ago, and so this was kind of her, I'm going to get out of town for a little while and kind of regroup and look forward to something. This was her trip. So she took a river cruise through like Prague and Budapest and Nuremberg, and I have no idea what river it was because I'm not very geographically the Danube River. And so she was on one of those, and she had a great time. She brought back all kinds of pictures, and we were talking about it with her. And then we wound up at my in-laws' house, who's from Prague and Czechoslovakia before it became the Czech Republic. And George, my father-in-law, was telling us that there's still like a cabinet maker or something in Prague with the same last name that he has, the Stalic Cabinet Builders or whatever. And so we thought that was pretty cool. Well, he went on to tell us a story about how his family came to the United States. And I don't remember if it was his grandfather or his great-grandfather. Somebody came over on a boat through his father through Ellis Island. You know, and so you kind of see Ancestry.com things, and you think, that's kind of cool, I'd like to know. Well, so his dad came over on a boat through Ellis Island, so his name's all registered there, whatever. They planted, I think it was in New York or that area, and they started their new lives. You know, he was married and all of that. So at some point, they started going to church. And in this particular church, they had gone for a couple of weeks when somebody in the church came to my father-in-law's father's wife. Okay, so that's a little confusing, but his grandma, right? And said, you need to pay your pew dues, or you can't come back here. You know, thank God we don't have pew dues here. Thank God we don't have pews here, to be honest with you, right? But could you imagine going to a church that said, unless you do this, you're not welcome back? And what happened then is that generation of people never went back to church, ever. And then my father-in-law never went to church until he met his current wife, and she got him to go to church. I don't know where his family, which includes my wife and our children, would be had it not been for God's intervention through Cheryl, his wife, to get him back into church. I don't know where that family would be today spiritually. See, it only takes one thing to impact generations of people. You see that? One thing. And so if we want to be a good church, we've got to make sure that we don't do whatever that one thing is. because I truly believe, and I've heard this said over and over again, that God keeps an open house for the universe. Isn't that awesome to know? That God would have everybody follow him, that God would have everybody come to him, that God would sacrifice his son for everyone, not just a select few, but so that anyone could have relationship with him. That's an amazing God. He keeps an open house for the universe. So if church is God's house on earth, then we better learn how we can keep an open house for everyone, right? So that we don't wind up causing some family and their line to miss out on God's grace and his mercy for how many ever generations it might take for an intervention to come back and get them into church. It's pretty important. So the number 4 thing on our list here of tasks that great churches do is we need to keep an open house for God, for his people that he's calling to. How do we do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. And luckily, we're going to turn to the place that we find all of the answers that we need to know about God, his word, the Bible. And if you have a Bible, go ahead and flip the paper pages. If you have an electronic one, power that sucker up. And we're going to be in Acts chapter 2 today. And since Acts chapter 2 is so incredibly long, we're going to start at the very, very end of Acts in verse 42. I'll give you a second to get there. But Acts starts out, Dr. Luke is writing the book of Acts, kind of filling in what happened after Jesus leaves the earth and goes to heaven. And he's writing to somebody that he knows fairly well, and he's explaining these events. And so this is kind of the beginning of Acts, starts out at the very tail end of Jesus' life on earth, but he's still alive in heaven, okay? And this is where he picks up in verse 42. Well, actually, the church starts to grow after he leaves, and this is what they find the church doing. Do you guys have a title for that part of your scripture in your Bibles? Some of you do. What are some of the titles in your books? The First Church. Great. Mine says the Fellowship of Believers. Okay? And that's what I'm keying in on this part for now, is the Fellowship of Believers. Let's listen to what Luke explains is happening in that church in the very early stages, okay? So verse 42 says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Let's stop right there. They devoted themselves to these things. Have you ever been devoted to something? Is it easy to be devoted, or is it hard to be devoted? Sometimes it's hard, isn't it? I mean, you've got good intentions at first, but then all of a sudden life happens, and so you've got to kind of be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more cautious. You've got to put your mind to it. It might take some effort. It might take some sacrifice. It might take some pain and some suffering to be devoted to something. But they were devoted to what does it say? The apostles, teaching, and fellowship. So this new group of believers, because Christ had just ascended and gone to heaven, brand new movement kind of on the earth at this time. All kinds of opposition and weirdness around, what do you believe about that? And wait, so are you part of the synagogue? Are you not part of the synagogue? All of these questions are happening, but yet this says they devoted themselves. It wasn't just something that they did once in a while. It wasn't just adding a belief system to their already busy lives. It was entirely changing their lives to pursue this. Entirely changing their lives. Has this message changed our lives in that way? I think sometimes it probably has. Sometimes we probably get a little bit lackadaisical about it. But listen, we have to stay devoted to it. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. They were hungry for instruction. They wanted to know more. And it was so exciting to be a part of. It made it really easy for them to start doing more and more stuff together. Verse 43 says that everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by all the apostles. Early on in the church, to get things kind of primed and get it going, God allowed the apostles to do all kinds of miraculous things. So a lot of what we saw Jesus do, healing the sick, all of that stuff, blind people, lepers, anything that you could think of, the apostles were capable of doing the same thing. We don't see that as much today, and many people believe that that's because in the early days, God just really wanted to separate his church from everything else so that people could see what was going on. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't continue to do miracles today, but most pastors in most churches can't heal you with their hankies. So, I'm sorry to let you down there. All right, so everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Verse 44, all of the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. Sounds a little bit fishy, doesn't it? A little bit like maybe communism. Maybe redistribution of wealth, so we're going to take from the rich and give to the poor. But please recognize that's not at all what was happening here. What you see this say is they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So they would be sensitive and aware of the needs in the community. If they heard that somebody over there needed something that they didn't have, they'd be like, how can we meet that need? What can we do to help them? That's part of what fellowship means. It's being aware of what's going on in people's lives around you so that you can step in and assist them. Now, in this particular case, it says specifically about possessions, but I'll tell you that it was probably more than just that. Oftentimes, when you hear me talking about meeting need, I call it ESP. And now I'm going to call it ESPF. Not because SPF like sunproof factor or whatever, or ESPN because that would be too sports related, but ESPF means they met needs based on emotional support and help needed. If you've ever been overwhelmed by life emotionally, you know how important and significant a role that plays. So the E is emotional. S is spiritual. And in a fellowship and in a group of people that are together and in this particular place and time, they were helping each other spiritually. If somebody would come away with questions based on the apostles' teaching, they would say, let me show you or tell you what I think that means and how I think that applies to our lives and all of that. So spiritually, the P is physical needs. Physical needs. So if your neighbor needed a handicap access ramp to get into his house, they would go out there and build it for them. If they had wheelchairs back then, I have no idea. And then F, which I added recently because I kind of felt like the P, the physical part, included that, but now I don't think it necessarily does. The F is financial. People have financial needs. They have significant financial needs. They have times in their lives when things aren't coming together well and they need a little bit of help. And so in each and every case, I think the church, as we follow these kinds of patterns that we see, needs to be considering how do we help people around us with the ESP and F. How do we help? If we have time, I'll share how we've done that in the past, and maybe as we move into the future, we'll come up with new and fresh ideas as well, okay? But verse 45, they sold their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need in any of those areas. I'm sure they were trying to help and support. Verse 46, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. How often? Every day. Every day. Not once a week on Sunday mornings at 10:30. Every day. What would that look like for the American church if we met together every day? Do you think that would make a difference about how we prioritized our lives? And I'm not saying, folks, that we need to go out and do that every day. I think every day you have an opportunity to show God's love. I think every day we have an opportunity to magnify Him. And sometimes I think for us, even coming to church once a week is tough. And maybe what we need to do is we need to consider if we're going to have strong fellowship and community together so that we can keep this house open for the universe, maybe it's going to take a little bit more than sometimes being here. Important stuff happens in this place. Not because of what I say, because honestly, I get tired of hearing myself talk. But we believe that God himself has words for us. He has words for you in his word. And as we go through it, it's going to touch you in different ways. And some of you, it's going to hit you one way, and some of you, it's going to hit you another way. And we believe that God works through that. But it's important to gather. It's important to be together. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all of the people. See, gathering as often as they did became a way for them to worship God. It became an element of their worship time. Daily they were meeting together. Daily they're praising God together. Daily they're meeting one another's needs. Daily, daily, daily. And it's a part of their worship experience in glorifying God. No wonder it says at the end of this, verse 47, praising God and enjoying the favor of all of the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Why? They were watching this whole thing unfold right in front of them. Imagine living in a neighborhood, and all of a sudden, the people in your neighborhood are caring for one another in ways that you've never seen happen before. They show up at your doorstep and say, hey, you know, we're part of this group down the street, and we just wanted you to know if you need anything, please come and let us know. Well, why? Well, because we're just recognizing how God's met our needs in ways that we never even considered before he came to earth and died on the cross. And we want you to know his love the way that we've experienced his love. And so if there's anything that we can do for you, please let us know. Imagine how that would change your neighborhood. Yeah. See, this idea of fellowship and what Luke is writing about in this early church was they had this strong degree of fellowship. And what is fellowship? Fellowship is a group of people that come together, that care about one another, and that have a common goal. And if that's all the church needed, I think we would miss out, right? Because any group can come together and have a common goal. You can have a chess club, you can have a fly tying club, because that sounds kind of fun for me. If you wanted to put together a group of people that was like a Pinterest club, you could probably get a lot of that, and that would have that. It would have a group of people that cared about finding stuff on Pinterest, right? Why would that group exist? I don't know. But maybe it would, and maybe there would be enough interest in Pinterest to do something like that. But is that fellowship? By the world's definition, maybe a little bit. Do you think that that's community transforming fellowship? No. Because what was happening here is this kind of fellowship, this kind of common interest, common purpose, common goal, and uniting around that and supporting one another was about God and his mission on earth and how he showed them love and how they knew out of that they needed to show as many other people as they possibly could God's love because it changed their lives. And they knew that it could change other people's lives too. That's fellowship. So what does that mean for us? Okay? Well, as a church, we need to become even more, and we're already doing a really good job with this, guys. Okay? I mean, I can't tell you how great I think we all do with this, and not because I do it, but because you guys are doing it, and I'm a part of the we. You guys are fantastic at finding out what kind of needs are in each other's lives. You're fantastic at being aware of what's going on in each other's lives. You're fantastic at knowing. And you're fantastic at texting and saying, hey, do you guys need help with this? Hey, I've got this. Do you need it? Hey, we have all kinds of this stuff. Does anybody need it? And by the way, if y'all know somebody that needs a dryer, let me know. Because we have one, and the house had one, and so now we've got an extra.
Just a dryer,
not a washer. Our washer was grinding, making terrible noises. Yeah.
just one.
I don't know why the whole dryer thing popped into my head right now. Like, so I'm sorry.
We've got a desk too.
It's going to turn into a swap meet here real quick. What else? Who needs a desk? Right? Anybody else have anything? See, I'm telling you, isn't this awesome though? This is what I'm talking about. When you have an extra, when you have a possession that you're like, somebody else might need this, and they might need it even more than me, and I'm willing to go without so that they can have. That is the type of fellowship this community had, and this community has.